Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Coach and the Culture podcast. It is so great to have you with us. Those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on iTunes, on Audible, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Coach and the Culture. I am Coach Frank, and I am joined, as always, by my son, the owner of Yes Trees, co-host of the Coach and the Culture podcast, Lance Gardner. Say what's up, Lance. Lance is not there.
Oh, I'm here now.
Hey, there he is. There he is.
Yeah. I said what's up. You know, we're doing this via Zoom right now. We're not in the studio. So when you say I'm not there, you know, they might be thinking, what was you talking about? He's not there. Well, that's what we mean. I'm not there.
Yes. I mean, he's visible but invisible.
Right.
And of course, we got none other than the super producer himself, Lloyd Leon. Cool. What's up, Cool?
What's up, man? What's going on?
Hey, man, I know you were just ecstatic watching that super exciting Vikings game.
Yeah.
All the points that were scored. It was an amazing up and down the field offensive juggernaut performance of two teams, finishing with a whopping final score of 3-0. I know, Coop, you was geeked with every score.
Man, they killed my fantasy, bro.
The Vikings game night might not have been entertaining for him, but he did go to the Wolves on Wednesday, so that was probably a lot better.
Yeah, that was a good time. It was a good time.
The environment, like,
energy is crazy, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, you see stars in the making, man. It was great.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. I think it was one of our Hope It Never Ends was the vibe in the Target Center. And before we get to talking about the Wolves, I got to give a shout out to my boy, CJ Armstrong Jr. at Richfield High. We had our first two games last week. This past week, I talked about it, how we were kicking the season off. And he went and broke the school single game scoring record with 47 points. There's some controversy as to whether he scored 47, 49, 50, but 47 points is the official tally that we had. The Huddle official score, I think, had him for 50. And it didn't matter because that record stood for a whole 4 days. And he turns around and goes head-to-head with Cameron Ferguson, who I think right now is the number 5 scorer in the state. CJ's number 6 scorer in the state, and he drops 51 on St. Cloud Tech on Saturday night. So, yeah, that record stood for a whole 4 days. And now here's the thing. This is why I got to shout him out. He's the number 6 scorer in the state. But every person in the top 5 ahead of him has played 3 games. He's only played 2.
Mm-hmm.
That boy balling.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yes. And coach and Lance, you know that I am the defense coach. You know how I am about defense. You know I'm loving this Wolves season because defense. I'm crazy about defense. Man, we went out there locked up Saturday night, bro. Man, it was such a thing of beauty. It was such a joy. It was that moment we talked about last week where the players are getting geeked off of watching what their defense is creating from the opponent. Oh man, it was like, look, if we can bottle that, we're gonna cause some problems in 3A this year. If we can bottle that, we can't count on CJ scoring, dang near 50 or 50 plus every night. But what you can count on every night is bringing that defense. And I'm a little geeked about our squad starting off 2-0. I had to give them a shout out, man, before we got to started talking about our Wolves. I was just so proud about our defense on Saturday, man. I'm still beaming about it. You should probably know.
I may or may not send him this podcast just so he can hear you say that you can't count on him scoring 45 every night.
No challenging. He's motivated plenty enough to put the ball in the hole. We don't need to challenge it. We do need him to drop some dimes. But he had dang near triple-double with that 50 on Saturday, man. I'm pretty sure he made it at or close to double figures in rebounds, and I'm not sure where he was at in assists, but he was a one-man wrecking crew out there, man.
Oh, so what's up?
It was beautiful. And speaking of one-man wrecking crew, I know, Lance, you got us on the slate to talk about that one-man wrecking crew that's man in the middle for the Minnesota Timberwolves, Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, I do. He is definitely on our talking point list here, and I'll actually run through what we are going to talk about tonight just so the listeners can kind of have an idea where we're going.
Break it down.
We're going to start with the Spurs and the Grizzlies, last two games that the Wolves pulled out W's in. We're also going to talk about Ant's return, and alongside of that, we're going to be talking about, like you just said, Rudy Gobert's dominance over those last two games. A couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned that Alex Rodriguez, I felt, brought some energy and kind of a new outlook on things when he ended up purchasing the Timberwolves, and I finally got a chance to go back and listen to some of his interviews. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I heard from him and what I took away and kind of related to where they are today. We'll talk a little bit about the in-season tournament that the Lakers just won last night and kind of what that looked like overall for the NBA. And then after that, we've been talking about this 16-game stretch that starts tomorrow against the Pelicans, and really kind of dissect what that means for the Timberwolves and what that looks like and what we what we kind of expect or would like to see at the end of this stretch. And then lastly, we will end it with our bit of concerning trends and hope it never ends. That we caught back up on last week. So we'll go over what we talked about last week and close it out and get prepared for this 16-game stretch that the Wolves have. That's really going to be a tell about what this season is going to look like as it gets further into the gauntlet.
Yeah, and it's funny because you know me, I'm all over Twitter all the time, Timberwolves Twitter at least, because that's where so much of the conversation centered around the Wolves happens. I'm actually working with a gentleman, Jonah, on Twitter. We've been talking back and forth. He does a lot of the posting videos and video breakdowns on Twitter. And he really does an excellent job of picking videos that are relevant and really kind of showcasing what the Wolves are or aren't doing. And so I definitely want to try to get him. He lives out of town. I want to try to get him as a guest when he comes into town for the holiday break, whether we do it over the Zoom or whether we actually have him come on down to the Dream Shop and try to work it out where we can set up some of his video clips and talk to him a little bit about why he started doing this. I think he does some writing, some freelance writing for Zone Coverage as well. So I'd like to try to set it up to talk to him and go over some video together and talk about what he's seeing and then, break down what I'm seeing from a coach's perspective. I think that would be a cool addition to one of our podcasts. And so I'm working with him on that. But yeah, man, the reason I brought it up is because ever since really going into the game against Memphis, all of a sudden Twitter is, blowing up with conversation about this 16-game stretch. And I just had to chuckle because I'm like, we've been talking about this for weeks. Like, we've been on top of that, and so for the listeners, again, just, one more reason to tune into the Coach and the Culture podcast. Hopefully we have our own lane and do it in our own way, and talk about things that, are a little bit ahead of what everybody else is talking about. And so, yeah, that's just one more good reason to tune into us, because we have been on that 16-game stretch for the last 2 weeks and talking about how important all of those games against those average to subpar teams in the last 2 weeks were going to be, because, and it's so funny, Lance, because somebody, I was reading on Twitter today, and somebody had posted, I can't remember who it was, but they had posted that they would really be happy if the Wolves can go 8-8 in that stretch. Yeah, we said that 2 weeks ago too.
Man.
Check us out.
Yeah, we humbly, I think we definitely have a good idea, especially for two people. This is your second season doing this, but my first season, and that we're talking about stuff that guys, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the podcast realm are talking about, and even a little ahead of them. So I think we're off to a pretty good start, and we'll just continue to get better. And I know a lot of it's kind of drawing a blank on the word, foreseeing
Right,
And
foreshadowing.
yeah, foreshadowing. So we don't have, not everything's going to be 100% accurate and factual, but I think that with our intelligence and just experience, we're able to, see, like you've said, what Coach Finch sees. I mean, that's why you're here. You're a coach, and you're looking ahead and trying to figure out what can be done to solve, certain things that are happening, and also finding the positives that are happening as well.
Yeah, one last thing before we get into this first game of last week that we're going to talk a little bit about. I want to give a shout out to our super producer, Lloyd Leon Coop. I definitely want to toot his horn a little bit because last week, for the first time, we were able to put up our YouTube broadcast live from the Dream Shop. And Lloyd, it looked and sounded so professional, so well done. I studied it, and just being able to kind of see how you work the camera angles and, where we can improve, looking into the camera when we're talking to the audience and versus looking at each other and all of those things you were kind of talking us through, man. Your production work and your directing, man, I got to give you your flowers right here on the podcast, man. That was that's top notch. So if you haven't had a chance to go check out last week's episode, go to YouTube, type in your YouTube search, The Coach and the Culture, the and symbol, not A&D, but the and symbol. Type in the Coach and the Culture, and you will see our podcast from last week on YouTube, and it is top-notch professional stuff, man. So I really appreciate you, Coop.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Appreciate it, sir.
And that will continue to get better as well, as that was our first, setup, and so all of it's going to keep getting better.
Yeah, every other week, you guys, you'll be able to catch us and see our chiclets and our smiles and handsome faces, on live on the video screen. For those of you who don't know, Lance is also a part-time model. So,
I'm just, they might
eye candy.
the surprise is going to be when they catch me with a haircut.
Well, baby.
You're right. Well, let's jump into this. We got the last two games since we talked last Sunday, the Spurs and the Grizzlies. In those games, Rudy Gobert had the same stats in both games. He had 16 points and 20 rebounds in back-to-back games, which is pretty phenomenal. So especially the Grizzly game. I mean, he got 20 points in both games, but it looked like against the Grizzlies, he was just, there was nothing they could do. He was getting his hand on every rebound, and he had at least 3 or 4 tip outs that he doesn't get accredited rebounds for, but got the ball out to a guard on the 3-point line, and it just looked like there was absolutely nothing that they could do with him on the boards.
Yeah, the thing about Rudy that's really impressive right now, in my opinion, is the way he's moving is just really, really impressive. His energy level, there was a lot of talk about, which I didn't agree with, there was a lot of talk about how, he's turning 31, and traditionally bigs, guys that size, when they get into their 30s, they start to slow down. And last year, is that the Rudy that we're going to get going forward, that we traded for, and all of this stuff. And my theory on it then, as you very well know, Lance, was all of these conversations don't take into account the impact of being in a new city, being with a new organization, being in a new system. And then the guy that's kind of also before I get to that, dealing with D'Angelo Russell and really almost feeling like D'Lo just never really wanted Rudy there. And like, he just don't like Rudy, which is a lot of players in the league. Most of them tend to be guards for whatever reason. Maybe they get tired of him swatting their shots. But a lot of players in the league seem to, and I'm just, pontificating, seem to have their feelings about Rudy. But the cat injury was huge. The cat injury can't be understated. Not having that time over the course of a full season to develop a style and develop an identity when you're trying to blend two players that have traditionally played the same position Comfort is so much a part of a player's ability. Being comfortable matters so much, and it's so much harder for centers, especially, but bigs, to get comfortable with their surroundings because they're so dependent on both ends of the floor on everybody else doing things in a way that is familiar to them or in a way that is expected by them in order for them to look good doing what they do well. And I don't care what anybody says. Maybe Rudy was a little bit injured coming into last year. That's probably true. And maybe he just wasn't comfortable and D'Lo didn't make him feel comfortable. I don't think the Minnesota fans were very, gracious in bringing him into the fold. I think there was a lot of elements that played a role. But I cannot express to you, both as a former player at the high school and collegiate level and as a current coach, how much comfortability and vibe matter, especially for somebody who's so dependent on everybody else in order for them to really look good. And Cat's injury never allowed that team to develop any comfortability as a unit, and it definitely, therefore, did not allow Rudy to develop any comfortability. And if you've ever played organized basketball and you've ever played in the post, and I'm in that unique position where I played both in the backcourt and in the front court as kind of a small forward, undersized power forward at times. Heck, I jumped center in high school, my junior year. And then also playing in the backcourt, sometimes a point guard in a big lineup, two guard. Lance, you know that as well because you played everything from two guard to center. And it's very different when you're playing center, the relationship that you have to have with your other players versus when you're playing guard and you're going to get touches and that your job defensively is simplified to a certain extent when you just have to guard your guy or jump to your midline.
And I think Mike Conley, we've talked about it many times already, but him coming over and being that vet who actually played with Rudy for 4 years already, is able to communicate with the other guys and express exactly what you and I just talked about and share with them, what Rudy's tendencies are and how we can get the best out of him because he had already played with him for 4 years. And so that also coming into play, the way he's playing right now, he's accepted, which I had talked about also last year. A big part of that just with him and Ant, and it just looked like Ant was another one of those guards that didn't really want to play with Rudy. And now I just look at everybody. It seems like they are having a great time. They've accepted one another. They're comfortable with one another, like you stated. And another thing just on the health aspect of Rudy, yes, getting into the 30s, you start to look at, okay, is the decline coming? Well, the way I look at Rudy, he is moving very well. And personally, I don't think Rudy is a big jumper. I think he's just long and he's intelligent. And a lot of times when you are dealing with bigs like that, the knees are probably the first thing to go when you're taller like that. And Rudy doesn't do a whole lot of jumping and put a whole lot of stress on those knees. And you talk about injury last year, and when he was on the bench, he oftentimes did have those knees wrapped up. And so I don't know, we're still early in the season and we'll kind of see how it continues, but just a positive thing for the situation is that Rudy is not someone who's jumping out the gym every time and landing on those knees, all game long.
Yeah. And here's the other part about that too, is I think a lot of people talk out of both sides of their mouths because you can say, well, traditionally bigs when they get into their 30s slow down, but we're not in traditional times. Modern medicine, modern workout regimens, the way guys take care of their bodies now. I mean, clearly Rudy put a lot of work in on his body and his conditioning. We say the same thing for Mike Conley. Mike Conley, 36 years old, is out there running around chasing 20-year-old guards, and still blowing by people at his age. We talk about LeBron as the ultimate example at 39 years old. Or 38, look at what he is doing, in his 21st year in the league or whatever, whether they've had injuries or minor surgeries, surgery technology is way far advanced over what it was even 10 years ago, let alone 15, 20 years ago. The way guys understand nutrition, the way guys understand conditioning, the way guys take care of their body year round now. And it's not like maybe it was 20 years ago where in the off season guys would drink beers and smoke cigarettes. And then they come into the season and get into shape. Guys come into the season, with their body in optimal shape now. You're seeing that in every sport. You look at boxing. There used to be a time where, if you were a welterweight boxer and you got into your mid 30s, the speed goes and, you all of a sudden you can't compete. And now you look at how long Floyd Mayweather fought at a welterweight. You look at Terrence Crawford at 35 years old at a welterweight. You look at almost any sport, you look Adrian Peterson, and I know he's a freak of nature, but look at what he did at the running back position coming off of ACL surgeries, shredded knees, because the surgery technology, and if a guy's committed to his body, which Rudy's workout regimen and his commitment to his body is well regarded around the NBA. So I think guys kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth when they say, well, is Rudy going to start declining at 31 years old? But then at the same time, we'll acknowledge that in these modern times, the body can do, guys are preparing their bodies to have longevity. And the example I'll give is Tyson Chandler. What was Tyson Chandler when the Dallas Mavericks won their title and he was holding down the middle for Dallas? Wasn't he like 36, something like that, in his mid to late 30s? And Tyson Chandler played pretty much the same role, to a lesser extent, but pretty much the same role that Rudy is playing for the Timberwolves. Shot blocker, rim protector, rebounder, enforcer in the middle, who can also get out on the perimeter, move his feet and cover a little bit in his mid-30s. So there's a perfect example. And that was, how many years ago? Almost a decade ago?
Right. Yeah, no, he is absolutely, I wrote down Rudy's dominance. I mean, he is dominating the court right now. He is dominating defensively, dominating the rebounds, dominating in the paint. Just keep talking about that trade. And you know what? Right now, look, they showed it. I was just on Facebook, I think 2 days ago, they showed someone posted a trade and they were like, the Jazz have Walker Kessler is the only person left on the Jazz from that entire trade. And then they have obviously the draft picks, but he's the only one left.
Yeah. And the thing about that is, look, again, we talked about it here on the Coach and the Culture podcast. Back when it was the Coach and the Crooner podcast, we had that conversation about that trade. The first round draft picks are only every other year. They're not every year, because in the NBA, you cannot trade consecutive first round draft picks. The idea of Rudy being on the team means that those draft picks are going to be late, first round to, outside of the lottery at worst, because Rudy's presence alone is going to keep them in the playoffs. And even last year with Cat missing 55 games and them having to go through the play-in, Rudy's presence kept them afloat. They do not make the playoffs without Rudy last year. Nobody can convince me they make the playoffs without Rudy last year. And so what was Utah's pick that they got from the Wolves? 16, 17, 18, something like that?
Yeah, it's going to be much worse.
Well,
in 2 years.
Here, the Wolves keep their pick, and next year, there's a very high probability that the pick is going to be in the 20s. So really, what's the value of that compared to the value of what Rudy is bringing you right now?
Right. So, yeah, Rudy is he's doing his thing out there, and helped them astronomically over those last two games, and his numbers are great.
So let's bring that back full circle to the Spurs win, the 102-94 win over the Spurs. And the way Rudy and Mike Conley is just a surgeon. The way Mike Conley Jedi sliced up the Spurs with not just, his own game, 18 points, 4 and 4, one turnover, but also, the hockey assists and the way that he's organizing the floor so that other guys can get off. That was a game where Cat, was in not in foul trouble, but struggled with some turnovers. But, the Spurs really keyed in on Cat. And much to Cat's credit, he didn't force shots. He only got 6 shot attempts up, but he made 5, gave you 14 and 10. And then, we talked about Rudy's 16 and 20, and 2 blocks to go along with that. And then we talk about Naz Reid, who gave you another 15 and 9. And the thing about that is, the game before that was the Charlotte game where the 3 bigs went for a combined 77, right? Something like that. And then, it wasn't a combined 77, but you look at this game and they give you a combined 44 points and and 39 rebounds. So you look at what Rudy is doing in relationship with Nas and Cat, and that 4 or 5 position is rock solid. I'd say one of the best, if not the best, in the league right now. And then of course Ant gives you 17 that game, first game back coming from injury. Took a lot of shots to get him. Took 17 shots to get him. Got to the free throw line 8 times, which is for a guy with a bad hip. That's taking some contact. He
Right.
out 6 assists. And so and I mentioned it on Twitter, Twitter, X, whatever, Twitter, that ahead of the game I said the Wolves are getting San Antonio coming off of 4 days in which Pop, at least 3 of those days, has been able to get his team back into the practice gym, because you don't get a lot of practice time in the NBA. So you give Popovich 3 days to get his team motivated, to get his team organized, to kind of come up with, help his team kind of reset their identity. It didn't really matter to me that San Antonio was struggling. It didn't matter that they were on a losing streak. What mattered to me was I know how elite of a coaching mind that Greg Popovich is, and he was going to have 4 days to prepare his team to get back to war. And it was ugly. Let's be honest. The game itself was ugly both ways. And for the Timberwolves, it was ugly until the fourth quarter. And then Mike Conley did Mike Conley stuff, and Rudy Gobert did Rudy Gobert stuff, and the Wolves pulled it out, and people were complaining about, the Wolves kind of are going to get caught up letting these lesser teams hang around. And I just don't think of it that way. As a coach, I'm like, you have to respect every opponent. You have to respect the fact that Greg Popovich had 4 days to kind of reset his team and get them playing some defense, which they did, and play some better basketball. So you had to take the Spurs seriously. And this idea that the Wolves are just supposed to come out against the Spurs of the world or the Grizzlies of the world and go up by 20 at the end of the first quarter and blow these teams out, that's just not how the NBA works, right? These guys are professionals. And it's very rare, no matter what the records are, that a team just comes out and whitewashes a team in the first quarter, gets up by 20 and blows them out the whole way. It happens, but that's far and few between. The way it usually happens is the bad teams hang around. You can say it's because the good teams are letting them hang around. If that's how you feel, I disagree. Sometimes the bad teams are playing with a lot of fight, and you have to beat the fight out of them. You have to pummel the fight out of them. And what more way to pummel the fight out of a team than with staunch defense? And so, the Wolves, at the end of the day, they give up 94 points to the Spurs. They suffocate them with defense. And over the course of 4 quarters, those bad teams start making bad team decisions and taking bad team shots and making bad team mistakes. And the good teams stay solid in what they do. In the Wolves' case, it's defense, and it's playing big, and it's Rudy dominating, and it's Mike Conley surgically cutting people up. And they pull away. And, the fans can be like, oh, that was an ugly win. The game was ugly, yes. But to me, the way the Wolves finished that game is what good teams do when they're playing bad teams in the NBA. They don't often blow them out from the jump. But in the second half, they take over games. And they did that against San Antonio. And then they followed that up with a very similar performance against Memphis.
Yeah, and then you talked about Ant and his 8 free throws and coming back off that injury, and just watching him play, when screens were getting set on him, or anytime throughout the game where he was getting close to contact, you could clearly see that he was trying to avoid that. He was trying to go high over the screens. He was trying to kind of rotate his body so that his hip wasn't out there. And as we talked about, we both know exactly what that hip pointer feels like. And I personally, it's evident because he only played 4 minutes in the Grizzlies game the next or 2 nights later. But, in those situations, that man, when he fell, he jumped so high. I know how bad it hurts, and I don't jump nearly that high. So I can only imagine it being 3 times worse, coming down with all your body weight like that. And, for him to come out and, yeah, he took a lot of shots and they weren't really falling, but to still have 7 assists and 6 rebounds on a hip pointer like that, really shows his determination and desire to be out on the floor, because it clearly it hurt. And so, but again, they have depth. This team has talent all around it, and so they're, even though he, against the Grizzlies had to exit the game, and yes, it was the Grizzlies who are not playing very well right now, but the team,
1 3 out of 4.
The Grizzlies.
Yeah, they had 1 3 out of 4 coming into that game.
Okay, well, that's even better. For my case for the Wolves having talent, depth, and picking up the slack when he had to get out of there. But I want to talk a little about over those 2 games how Cat, he shot 83% from the field the first game, and then 50% from the field against the Grizzlies, and then I looked at his 3-point percentage for the year, and he's up to 43%. Yep. And that just lets you know, if you were listening to our podcast at the beginning, we were talking a lot about how his shot wasn't falling. And so his 3-point percentage, the first probably from week and a half of the season was pretty low. And now for him to be up over 42%, and it was 42.8%, he's been shooting the ball so well. And you touched on it. He's not forcing shots. I mean, I don't know, mentally, if he knows he's 50, 40, 90, and he's like, you know what, I'm not taking nothing unless it's for sure to go in the basket because I don't want to lose these numbers. But if that's the case, I mean, it's working for him and also for the team because, he's moving the ball. He's not, he's scoring way less points than he has over the last 5 or 6 years, but he's playing at a much higher clip. He's playing a lot smarter. He's playing amazing basketball. And there's no denying it. And, go ahead.
I'll say we talked about it with Rudy, comfortability. Right now, Cat is comfortable. Beginning of the season, he looked very uncomfortable. And right now, he looks very comfortable. When he was shooting the 3 ball against Memphis, when he was letting it go, it just looked so smooth and so in rhythm. Just the whole mechanics were really smooth. And he just looks in control of his mind and his body and his game. It's a beautiful thing. Part of it, I think, being 28 years old and moving into that stage of life, that manhood stage of life that we've been talking about for years. I think part of the knock on Cat is we've watched Cat grow up from a boy to a man, and all of the things that happened in those years of, because he came into the league, I think he was 19, 20 years old after 1 year at Kentucky. So we watched Cat go through life, and he, in such a very public way, in part because of his game, in part because of his family, and COVID and his family traumas, and in part because Cat can sometimes bring attention to himself with his quirky personality and his quotes. But, we've watched him under a microscope. And now I think what we have to do is give credit to the fact that we are watching him move into that next stage. We talk about life being in cycles of 7, right? So Cat's now moving into that, that next cycle of 7, those years between 28 and 35, which as a 50-year-old, I understand how instrumental those years are in life as a human being, no matter what your profession. And I think we're starting to see that from Karl Anthony Towns as he progresses. But also I think you're seeing a guy who for the first time really in his entire career has continuity and stability in the organization that he plays for. And, we talked, it's much has been talked about the salary cap situation and the money he's making and Rudy's making and all of that. And we talked last week about how I feel like this team has a let's just handle today mentality. And I don't see any of that future stuff being a worry. Everybody seems comfortable right now and who they are as a human being and where they're going. I think Mike Conley is a big, big part of that. But I think that's what you're seeing from Cat. He's playing amazing basketball. He's shooting the ball comfortably. He forces some plays, but he's always going to force some plays. And let's be honest, show me an all-NBA, all-star caliber player that doesn't force some plays. Show me. That's part of the territory is to push the envelope when you're that damn good. And especially with Ant out or Ant hobble, and so the way Cat's playing right now is just really in control. Now, we got this 16-game stretch that everybody's talking about, and the pressure cooker is going to heat up. And so it'll be interesting to see if that sustains, if that vibe sustains, because, nobody goes to an 82-game season unscathed, not even the 73-win Warriors, because they didn't win the championship. So, how it all plays out.
I'm curious to see here when how if Ant's going to miss a couple games, because obviously having to come out of the Grizzlies game, and it seems to be something where you don't want to rush that back, even though it is a lot of a pain tolerance thing.
That's what I was going to say.
It's right, but at the same time, you don't want to be out there mentally, like I said, having to think about not getting hit and putting your team in compromised positions, which may be a reason on why he didn't go back out there, because just the pain was not, it wasn't bearable. And at some point you are going to hurt the team if you're not able to give most of your effort.
He said that in the San Antonio game, the first few minutes, he actually said it wasn't so much that he was in pain. He was just scared. He was worried about it getting hit, And so that
understood.
Yeah, we've both been there. So that very understood, because that pain is crippling, man. When that pain hits you, he called out of the game in Memphis pretty early, and Finch said that he took a hit, and then came down on it awkwardly after taking the hit and asked out of the game. And, again, we've talked about it. Anybody who's ever had a hit pointer, you can feel good at the start of a game and you get it hit one way and
one time,
wrong way, take an elbow. Like we said, NBA guys are dirty. They're going to target that hip.
Mm-hmm. So the Wolves find a way to get 2 more W's in that win column. They're 17-4, still atop the league overall, not just the West, but the entire league. They are 4.5 games above the Sixers. The Suns are the 7th seed. The Sixers are the 6th seed. They're 4.5.
It's not the Sixers. The Sixers are in the West. I mean,
in the East.
they're ahead of. I believe Sacramento is. I believe it's Sacramento who's in the 6th seed, right? And then the Phoenix is in the 7th seed.
That's my bad. We had it written down, and I can't.
Sacramento's in the 6th seed.
Okay.
That's the guaranteed playoff spot. They're 4.5 games ahead of Sacramento and 5.5 games ahead of the Suns. So, but really Sacramento is the big one, because the Suns are in the play-in position. 7, 8, 9, and 10 are play-in positions. So really you want to, obviously we want to finish with the number 1 seed, but we definitely don't want to have a stretch where we fall below 6.
Right. And that's where I was going with that, which is, they're building themselves a cushion. Obviously, we want to, like you said, we want to stay the 1 seed the entire year. We don't want to lose another game for the rest of the year, but that's not realistic. And so, at a 4.5, tell myself that like 2 weeks ago. Actually, still tell it to me now, but whatever. At 4.5 games, we're creating ourselves a little bit of that cushion to where, if we do go through a stretch where we drop a few, we're not dropping all the way down to that 6, 7, 8 seed. We're building ourselves up to where if we do slip, now we're looking at the 3, 4, 5 seed, which is still, yes, we want to stay at the 1 to 2, but if we drop down to 3, 4, 5, we're still in a great position as we, fight throughout the year. And that's something obviously with our past, that's not something that's been done before. We're always trying to fight back and find a couple games to get moved up a couple points. But now we're building ourselves a cushion to where if we do slip up, it's we're not ending up out of the playoffs or down there at the play-in spot. And yes, it's still early, and yes, we have a 16-game stretch coming up here. But if we're able to make it out of this on the up and up, then we will have created that cushion after the 16 games.
Yeah, I want to backtrack a little bit before we get to the foreshadowing, because I wanted to make a comment about the Memphis game that we did not bring up, and I think it's important because I've been on Twitter talking about it, and you and I have talked about kind of Shake Milton And Shake, when is Shake going to find his game? And, again, we talk about, Timberwolves fans can not be super welcoming to new guys that don't come out and light the house on fire right away. Rudy kind of talked about how he didn't feel really welcomed by the Wolves fans, and given a chance to kind of work through his struggles. Like, fans don't really take all the variables into account when because fans, many of them never played basketball, and many of them never played basketball. Like, if you're my age, you weren't really playing high school basketball at the time where you transferred. The transfer rules were so different, and college, if you played college, transfer rules were so different. And so even if you did play, like, not many people know what it's like to go to a new team in a new environment and then try to fit in 1 year. And that's something all too well. But we talked about how you got to give Shake some time, and you had even mentioned that their team is more focused on getting their core playing the style and the identity and playing the way they want to play, and that Finch just kind of keep throwing Shake out there. One, because McLaughlin was hurt, but two, also kind of like, just go out there and play. Just go out there and play through your struggles and just kind of be out there. We need you to be a body out there, and kind of hoping that it would eventually click. And the look in Shake's face in the Memphis game was a different level of intensity and certainty. It was almost like he went out there, and from the moment he came into the game, he had a look on his face that was like, okay, enough is enough. And he gives you 17 points on 6 of 9 shooting, his season high with the Wolves for this year. And just the assertiveness with which he played, was really, really impressive. Still turned the ball over twice. And funny enough, both times he turned the ball over, in my opinion, were plays that he was indecisive. But the rest of the time, he was very decisive. He was decisive in his shot taking, which, his shot had some arc on it. There was a rhythm to it. There was a tempo to the release that maybe we hadn't seen yet this season outside of the preseason. And I mentioned on Twitter, I said, I think this might be the beginning of Shake Milton starting to, be himself a little bit more out there on the floor. I don't think that was a one-time, okay, he had a good game and then he's going to go back to really struggling. I think that you might start to see Shake stack some games together. And also, Nikhil has been doing just a phenomenal job filling in for Jaden McDaniels. And, the team hasn't really missed a beat with him filling in. And so, he goes out there and he gives you 14 points on 4 of 9 shooting, but 4 of 8, 50% from 3. And then also Troy Brown, stepping in for Anthony Edwards, who only played 4 minutes. Troy Brown steps in, gives you 30 minutes, gives you 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, giving you, he can't give you what Ant gives you, but he gives you, really good scoring punch, really good defense. He gives you a really good Troy Brown version. And, if Ant's going to only play 4 minutes and have to leave the game, then you can still get 20 points from that position while Cat's giving you 24 and Conley's giving you 19 and Rudy's giving you 16 and 20. That's almost as good as Ant being out there on an average night.
Right.
And so,
Shake Milton definitely looked comfortable. Not comfortable. I shouldn't say comfortable, but he had that I have nothing to lose mentality.
Yeah.
Because if he continued playing the way he's been playing to start the season, his time is going to be very limited. And so I agree that he was just went out there and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna stop thinking and I'm gonna just go out and hoop and do what I do best.
Yeah.
And that's what the Wolves brought him in to do anyways. I mean, they brought him in to be a scorer. They brought him in to create your own shot. They brought him in to do exactly what he did against the Grizzlies. And it was great to see that. And I agree with you that because it's not his technique, it's not his lack of ability, it's strictly just his mindset that if he gets a few games rolling where it's like that, I don't think it's something that's going to go away. Obviously he's going to have off games, but it's going to be more consistently positive what we just seen than it is going to be what we've seen over the past 20 games.
Yeah, and we talked on the last week about those offseason acquisitions. We talked about Troy. We talked about re-signing Nikhil, and we talked about, Shake Milton. And we talked about like each one of those guys at different times of the year is going to be the difference in a game. Each one of those guys is going to be like, that's a game that Shake Milton won for us. That's a game that Troy Brown won for us. That's a game that Nikhil won for us. And Nikhil has won, I think a couple games this year. I think it's safe to say Troy Brown has won a game or two. Maybe even you could say the Memphis game was a game that, if Troy Brown doesn't perform the way he performs, maybe it's not a 20-plus point win. And they absolutely say that Shake Milton's minutes when Ant got hurt, especially early Shake Milton's minutes where he had most of that 17 right around the same time Ant went out early in the game. You could say that that's a game that Shake helped him kind of win. And then, Troy Brown's third quarter was obviously phenomenal, starting the third quarter for Ant. And that's when the Wolves really grab the bull by the horns, grab the Grizzlies by the bear ears. Put that game away.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring that up because Shake deserved his flowers for that game.
Yes, he did.
Everybody's been hard on him. We need to recognize when he played like we have been waiting for him to play. And you said it best. It looked like he stopped thinking and just went out there and played. And again, if you've never gone from one team to another team, especially a team with high expectations and high profile players, you don't know how hard it is to not be thinking out there and until you find your stride. And it's really a difficult thing to do, to get out of your own head, because you don't want to upset the apple cart. And once you start thinking, everything starts to kind of snowball for you. And it was nice to see him go out there, and it looked like on his face he said F it.
Yep. Yep. So I want to talk a little bit about the Alex Rodriguez interviews that I've watched. Probably 3 weeks ago, I just mentioned how I feel like him buying the organization kind of set a different attitude or had a big part to do with the culture shift that we're witnessing here in Minnesota with the Wolves. And so I listened to some interviews with him, and one of the things I wrote down here was that obviously Alex Rodriguez has won a championship in the MLB with the Yankees, and so off the bat, you have that championship experience and understanding what it takes to achieve that.
Not just win championships, but been the guy. I mean, him and Derek won in 1A. They were the guys on that team. So it's one thing to say you won a championship. Robert already got 7 championships. He was never the superstar. Alex Rodriguez was the superstar in New York City.
Correct. It's a great addition. Great addition to that. So leading as well as just winning championships, but yes, being a huge part in that. Also understanding that he won a championship, but it took him 15 years. And so you can imagine every single year for 15 years being that guy and being that good and falling short. So his, one of his biggest talking points was that, yeah, I won a championship, but I'm not trying to teach these guys what it felt like when I won the championship. It's about the 15 years of lessons that it took me to get to that point. And the struggles, he's like, I don't talk too much to them about the championship. I talk more about the, over my 23 years of career, what were my dark times? What were the times where things, I felt like I had no hope. And I felt like, it was a time to throw in the towel, like everything's going wrong just for that one, epitome of winning a championship. And so that's one thing that I thought was, was cool that, and I didn't even know that Alex Rodriguez had only won one championship out of all the years. Maybe I misheard him or something, because I swear I thought he did too. But from what I gathered, it was one. I'll look it up real quick. Bear with me.
I was pretty sure it was more than one.
He's got one in 2009.
Wow.
in 23 years of baseball, Alex Rodriguez has one championship.
3 AL MVPs, 14 All-Star games. So he was doing everything but winning the big one.
Yep. But he did get it. And so like I said, a big part of his interviews were just expressing the fact of, like I said, you can only imagine how hard it must be to do all of that to win one championship over 23 years. And then he talked a little about building a foundation. He said he was asked when he first got here, what are the expectations for the team in the first year? And he had said, I don't even have, there's no expectations. I don't really care about the right now. My focus here is to build a foundation that will last. And as a business owner, that's one thing that I look at, and I compare my work to other companies. And my biggest thing is that, yeah, you might have more faster, or you might have received something, but what I am building with Yes Trees is built to last, and it's going to be the foundation that's going to create success for multiple years, as you see, because he was asked about the Heat and the Spurs, and he was like, well, if you look at those two teams, again, it's the culture, it's the foundation, it's not who comes into play for us, it's when you do come play for us, you're jumping into a winning culture, a winning atmosphere. And so I love to hear him say that it doesn't matter what we do right now. We understand that it's going to take a little time to build something that's built to last. And I think that I think we've been with Tim Connelly making some very good moves. I think that we've received this success maybe even a little more prematurely than he would have anticipated, just by saying that alone. I mean, if you tell him you look up 2 years from now and you're the number one seed in the West, he would tell you, well, that's not even what I was shooting for.
I don't know. I think when the Rudy Gobert trade was made, that's exactly what they were shooting for.
Well, this interview was had before then, as soon as he bought the team. So,
okay.
Maybe that changed up. And I'm sure
because you already know you got Anthony Edwards, and you got Karl Anthony Towns, and then you add Rudy Gobert to that mix, and that kind of expedites the process.
Yeah, but you also have to understand that Alex Rodriguez I'm sure he's not basketball smarts in that aspect. So he's coming in as an owner, right, and he's saying, I don't really know much about basketball, but I do know that if we're going to do something special, we need to build a foundation. And so Tim Connelly was making those moves. Obviously, he wants it now immediately because that's his career on the line. But Alex Rodriguez is understanding what it takes to get and hold on to that. And so I think the two coming together at the same time just played a big part in it. But one thing that you and I talked about in the podcast last year when I was just visiting is that Tim Connelly has, we have guys that we think have talent that are sitting on the bench that aren't seeing any minutes. And you talked about how it's like he's just building players throughout the entire organization that are hoopers, that are able to come in and contribute. And that goes hand in hand with building that foundation. I think we do have people on the bench that are capable ball players, but we just have so many of them that you just kind of have to wait your turn.
Yeah, and as you very well know, with the NBA, when you get to that level of basketball, the good teams are good teams because, one, they absolutely have that culture, and the decisions that the players make on the court is what separates the good teams from the not good teams. It's not how fast a guy can run. It's not how high a guy can jump. In a lot of ways, it's not even how well a guy shoots, outside of your elite superstars. But really, the good teams are good teams because of their decision-making processes. And Kenny Smith on TNT talks about it, like the difference between the great players and the good players is the decisions that they make. It's not how many reps they get up or how many shots, it's not the work, because everybody's working hard in the NBA. It's about the decisions they make on the court. What separates LeBron and Michael Jordan, what separates those guys from, a Vince Carter even, or is the decisions that they make when they're out there. And so
I, I have another word for you that I'm going to use that he actually said that I think is synonymous with that. He said, it's not about baseball or basketball. It's who is the most disciplined team.
Yep.
So exactly what you just said, discipline, meaning that you are consciously making the right choice and the right decision, on a day in and day out basis. And one of his biggest things was, you know, putting your ego to the side. He was like, to be a disciplined team, you have to put your ego to the side. You have to accept everybody that's involved in, but you have to trust that from the top down that everybody's going to make the same right decisions. And then that will lead to everybody buying into being disciplined. And he was like, whether it's us as the owners, all the way down to the ball boys and the equipment managers and everybody throughout the organization has to be disciplined. And that, that word discipline fits exactly what you just said.
That's success in anything. I mean, even at the high school level, that's what we're talking with our players about all the time. That's why I am beaming about how we played on Saturday night, is because, from the game Tuesday to the game Saturday, the amount of discipline that our players played with just made me proud to be a part of that group of guys and that program and the coaching staff, the relationship that was happening on that bench amongst us coaches. Everything, the vibe, man. People talking about the vibe of the Wolves, on our level at the high school level for a night on Saturday. That vibe was just, man, I'm still full. My heart, my chest is still full from that vibe, because that was a special vibe. Now it's our challenge to keep that vibe going, because we're only 2 games in. But if you're talking about the Wolves, their challenge over the next 16 games is, can they keep that vibe going? And what's going to keep that vibe going is staying true to that discipline, that connectivity, even when the outcome isn't in their favor. They might not, most likely they won't win them all, but can they keep that vibe going, and can they keep that discipline even when the results isn't in their favor? And that's how you build that culture.
And that, to bring it full circle, that word discipline, we've said from the Wolves from the very beginning, this team that they have to come out and they have to maintain the level of energy and commitment every game, day in and day out. And that comes with discipline. When they're up by 20, when they're down by 20, they have to stay the course, stay their style. And discipline is what creates that, because it eliminates the other stuff that can creep in. If you say no, we're going to do this, we're going to do this day in and day out. That is discipline. And it's funny because that's what we've talked about over the past, pretty much this whole season. And I had, the reason I'm talking about A-Rod is just because I feel like he has brought a certain attitude to this team. And just hearing him talk, he's younger. He's been an athlete. He's able to relate. He's able to talk to these guys.
He was with J-Lo, so he can relate.
Yeah, he's had it all.
He done dated some hotties, man.
So I like listening to him, and I after all of the interviews I heard, I really do think that he is playing a big part behind the scenes and what's going on. Not just even how they're playing, but just he was talking a lot about how the NBA is a progressive league. And so, the Wolves, just the atmosphere of the games, yes, we're winning, so that helps, but the marketing that's gone into the Wolves, the updating, like it truly feels like he came in and got with the times. And I've noticed that even outside of the actual games that are being played, when it comes to the promoting, when it comes to the deals, when it comes to the Wolves being in front of your face, I've seen a big uptick in the amount of social media work, the amount of advertising, all of that stuff has really gone up as well.
I don't think that Anthony Edwards would be on the side of a building in Las Vegas when he signed his contract extension if Alex Rodriguez isn't part of the incoming ownership group.
There you go. Last thing I wanted to say about him, it was super cool. He emphasized in every single interview, and I'm not over whatever the heck the word is. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but every single interview he talked about how he is a brown person, a person of color, and the goal of his is to pave the way for other minority owners, for other people to see that even as a brown person, anything can be accomplished. And he said that religiously. And I thought that was super cool because a lot of times, unfortunately, guys aren't going to talk about that, or they're not going to say that. But it seems like it was an emphasis of his to make it well known, even here in the state of Minnesota, that he is doing this for a cause. And I was glad to hear that.
Well, hopefully, as soon as they take over the ownership group, they can go ahead and bring Kevin Garnett back, put his jersey up in the rafters, maybe put a statue outside the Target Center.
Yeah, there must be some, I don't, maybe you know more than I do, but there must be some real bad blood, because when I was, the interview, they asked, he was sitting next to Glenn Taylor, and they asked him, and he was like, okay, so now that you're, he was actually the interviewer was talking to Glenn Taylor, and he said, are you ever going to get Kevin Garnett back in here? And he said, well, we've asked KG to come back and have that ceremony multiple times, and it's more so on his time. And when he determines that he's ready. And so for them to say they've openly invited him back and he hasn't accepted that yet, I mean, there's got to be some real bad blood in there.
I know you're kind of new to this.
Yep.
And I'm not going to go into details because that's probably a whole nother podcast. And then there's other things that I kind of have heard through my, my Twin Cities,
Yep.
actions in the grapevine. But let's just say this, plain and simple, Kevin Garnett does not like Glenn Taylor, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yep. Well, I grasp that. So yes, hopefully that is the plan, because it's well deserved. But that's what I got from A-Rod. I do truly think that he's played a big part in where the Wolves are at today, and I'm excited for his progressive nature to keep things lively here in Minnesota. We can talk quickly about the in-season tournament and how that unfolded. The Lakers ended up winning it last night. We talked about off podcast how their pool was questionable. They had 3 out of their 5 teams. They had the Suns. We'll just leave it at this. The Suns was the only real competition that was in that pool, which they did have to beat twice. So I will give them credit for that, because they had to beat them once in the pool game, and then they also had to beat them in the actual tournament. I know they didn't. No, because that couldn't be the case.
No, they beat them. They beat them in the. They had to beat them twice. They beat them in the pool game, and then they beat them in the quarterfinals.
But how could they have beat them in the pool game, and then the Lakers and the Suns still made it to the quarterfinals?
Because the Suns got in due to the point differential. The Suns got in due to the point differential.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm lost on that. But regardless, the Lakers won. I get what you're saying about the point differential, but I thought that there could only be one winner from the pool, no matter what the point differential was.
Each pool had a winner, and then the point differential.
There were 2 extra seeds. That's right.
That was determined by point differential.
Gotcha. Okay.
I believe that those 2 teams that got in due to the point differential were Phoenix, and it was either, I want to say it was Sacramento went undefeated, so it would have been Oklahoma City, I believe.
Gotcha. Well, the Lakers ended up winning it. It seemed like it was a positive thing for the league. It seemed like there was a lot of notice on it. It seemed like it gave.
I don't know.
It seemed like it gave guys something to play for early in the season, on top of just getting out to a hot start. But it added some competitive fire to the regular season, which is nice, because that's something that's been talked about for some time now. And so they finally did something to make a change about it to make the regular season a little bit more competitive. So now that that's done, we'll see if it trickles over, or if we find ourselves with a little bit less competitive regular season, but with the schedules and everybody being competitive and having talent for the most part, I think that this is going to be one of the better regular seasons because everybody, as last year actually was pretty good, because everybody's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, I think the in-season tournament, here's the deal. Whether you liked it or whether you didn't like it, you had an opinion about it. And, there's no such thing as bad publicity, right? So some people liked it, some people didn't like it, but everybody had an opinion about it. And because everybody had an opinion about it, and because the Lakers were involved, and at one point in time the Knicks were involved, right? People watch the games. And let's be honest, the NBA is a great marketing machine. Just it knows how to take something that is normal and make it look super normal, right? And so at the end of the day, the Lakers played the Trailblazers and the Grizzlies. Like they didn't have a difficult pool. That's how both the Lakers and Phoenix got in, because they got to beat up on the bottom feeders of the Western Conference, and that's where the point differential played a role. The Wolves, who you lost one game to the Sacramento Kings, but because you didn't blow out, Golden State, and you didn't blow out, San Antonio to the level that, by 50 or whatever, by 40 or whatever, and then you had to play Oklahoma City, which just beating Oklahoma City was the win, if you ask me. And so, I think they can probably do away with the point differential. My suggestion is that they go with best regular season, like non-in-season tournament record to date as the tiebreaker, after head-to-head.
That
would have put the Wolves in, obviously, having the best record in the league. But, good for the NBA, good for the Lakers, good for LeBron. When the Lakers, I don't think, had to beat one team that was in their pool or in the tournament quarterfinals to the championship. They didn't have to beat one team that was a top 4 seed in either conference.
Right. Well, they only had to beat the Suns.
Like the mediocre against the mediocre. And yeah, the Suns got rolling a little bit, and so beating the Suns definitely, they get a feather in their cap for beating the Suns. But let's be honest, the Suns are what, in 6th place in the West, seventh place in the West. So right. They didn't have to play the Wolves. They didn't have to play the Thunder. They didn't have to play the Mavericks. They didn't have to play the Nuggets. They didn't have to play the Celtics, the Magic, the Bucks, the 76ers. So, they didn't beat a top 4 seed in either conference, but, they took advantage of what was in front of them. The NBA got great publicity out of the situation. And it gave people something to talk about in NBA basketball in the end of November and the early part of December. So kudos to the NBA. I'm sure they'll make adjustments. I'm sure that they'll make some tweaks, but I'm also sure, just like the playing games, the NBA in-season tournament will be back next year, and it'll probably be bigger and better than ever.
Yeah, well, shout out to the NBA for making god-awful courts to give also more people stuff to talk about. Because, look, they were bad. I think the Wolves was actually decent. I kind of like their court. I like the color scheme. Any other thing, I think the Pacers actually had a decent one as well, but for the rest of the ones I saw, I was not a huge fan. And the color scheme of the championship with the red and blue and the Lakers wearing gold, yellow on that court was disgusting. And I'm sure that it was another reason for us to talk about something, because there's no way that those courts are going to be similar next year. If Dame Lillard calls the courts god awful, then I think the NBA is going to do something about it, because them things were ugly.
Well, here's the thing. One person's spaghetti vomit is another person's abstract art masterpiece.
Yeah, well, I'm not buying it. So they're going to have to
spaghetti vomit to you.
Yeah. So the 16-game stretch is knocking on our front door, and we have to open it tomorrow. And we got to get busy. And we go ahead.
Let me just say this. We don't just open it tomorrow, but we open it tomorrow at a healthy, angry, embarrassed New Orleans Pelicans team going back to their own home floor.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
Zion has been browbeaten in the national media. Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith. I mean, they TNT just pretty much, man, took him behind the woodshed. The Pelicans got embarrassed by the Lakers, just mud stomped on national TV. They have a coach who is fiery and competitive. They have prideful players and CJ McCollum. And so the Wolves are going into the cliched Hornets' nest tomorrow night. And I am very curious to see how they respond to the type of energy that New Orleans is likely to play with from the opening tip. And I don't think that's the game you want to fall behind 20 points and have to call your way back. I think that is a game that the Wolves had better be on there. I call it the Boston Celtics version against Wolves, the version that played against the Celtics from the rooter to the tutor, from the opening tip into the final buzzer. And it still might not win you the game because Zion might just stick up his middle finger to everybody and go for 45, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. So the Wolves have their work cut out for them, especially if Ant is not playing tomorrow. We know Jaden's not playing, which means that whoever's guarding Brandon Ingram's going to be able to shoot over the top of him because Jaden's about the only player that the Wolves can throw at Brandon Ingram that he can't just shoot over. Yeah, they got their work cut out for them tomorrow, man.
That they do. And very curious to see if Ant's going to play. Again, it's a pain tolerance thing, but at a certain point, it can take you out. So, we'll see if he's back. Even if he is back, there's absolutely no way he's going to be at full strength. So, it is going to be a test for sure. We'll see who's going to step up to the challenge. We'll see, somebody, either the team is going to have an overall strong night from everybody involved, or someone's going to have to go off. Mike Conley, I think, has the ability to go off a little more than he normally does, but I think Cat is probably the only player that we can say has the ability to go off to a level to beat a team like the Pelicans that we just discussed. And so we'll see what tomorrow looks like. But that's just opening the door. Because after that, they got 15 more games against high-quality basketball teams. So, we talked about 8-8. Sounds like some other people are talking about 8-8. And again, that's just the bare minimum of what we would love to see. Obviously, we want to see more wins than 8. But if we can get to 8-8 on the other side of this, because after this 16-game stretch, honestly, we do have a couple games where we should win, and so if we can get through this 8-8 and then go on another, like you said, 5, 6, 7 game winning streak, then we're going to be right back towards the top of the West and probably still throughout the league.
Yeah, as a coach, you obviously you want a 3-0 week, but you don't want to be anything less than 2-1, which means you got to go get one on the road between New Orleans on tomorrow night and Dallas on Thursday night. And then you got to come back home and you've got to deal with the Indiana Pacers who, if you get caught up in their style of game, if you don't control tempo, if you don't control your shot selection and you don't make sure you get shots, meaning you have to get quality shots and you can't turn the ball over, at least not live ball turnovers. If you're going to turn it over, throw 7 rows into the stands, commit an offensive foul, travel. Just don't turn over the live ball against them and get them going because, they're the number 1 scoring team in the league right now. And, they're a little bit different than Boston. Boston came in the number 1 scoring team when they came in the Target Center, but Boston was doing it on veteran, we've been here before. We're one of the better teams in the league. Indiana's one of them teams that, their style is their style. And if you get caught up in their style, they can hang 130 on you, 140 on you in a hurry. So the Wolves have to be extremely disciplined in the Target Center to win that game. And so you're just hoping for a 2-1 week to start this stretch.
And we're definitely, I'm already excited to watch the games and be back here next Sunday to talk about them because we're definitely going to have a lot to talk about either way. And so, this week we had the Spurs and the Grizzlies, which at this point in the year, yes, everyone's in the NBA, but I'm comfortable in saying those are games that we must win and are supposed to win. And so these next 3 games aren't quite the same. And so we'll definitely have a lot to dissect and talk about. So make sure you come back next week on Monday and take a listen to what it is that we've seen over this next week. Let's go ahead and end this podcast here with our concerning trends and hope it never ends.
All right.
Last week, gonna be honest with you, I did not write down what my hope it never ends or concerning trends were, and so hopefully you might have an idea of what we said.
Yeah, yours were turnovers, rebounds, and Shake Milton. Those were your concerning trends.
Okay.
And your hope it never ends were the record.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what your other 2 were, bro.
Well, you did. Hey, that's on.
Hey, I got 4 out of 6.
I appreciate you. I'm keeping a buck. That's more than I had because I had 0. But out of my concerning trends, I'll tell you that because I honestly don't have the stats because I didn't. I fell short in this segment here. But Shake Milton sounds to me like he at least curbed my concerning trend by the game against the Grizzlies. I'm very glad to see how he was playing. As someone who played basketball, just seeing him, his shot was different. His shot was
decisive.
Yes, it was decisive. Like you said, it had arc underneath it, and the word I was looking for was confident. His shot was confident. His shot was like, I do this. I know I can make this. I'm putting it up and it's going in the basket and we're going to do this on repeat. So rebounding, do you know what their stats were over the past 2 games?
Yes, actually, I do. Okay. They gave up 13 offensive rebounds against San Antonio, but they won the overall rebounding battle 55-49. They also grabbed 11 offensive rebounds themselves, and we talked about how ugly that game was. So that game's kind of an outlier in a lot of ways. 2 teams off a long rest, and they looked like it. And then they bludgeoned Memphis on the boards. They won the battle 54-28. They had 15 offensive rebounds to Memphis's 8. And so they bludgeoned them on the boards. And then, the turnover numbers were, I'd say, 1 to 3 too high for me. They had 13 turnovers against Memphis, and I believe 11 turnovers against San Antonio. But that number's coming down. We haven't seen the 17s and the 18s lately. And so that number is starting to come down. And then out of those turnovers, one of the things I had to consider when those turnover numbers is when they're in the 17 and 18 turnover range, that's just too many for any professional basketball team. But 2, a lot of those turnovers were live ball turnovers, and they're the kind that fuel fast breaks and run outs. You get a team getting wide open threes and transition dunks and stuff. Out of their 13 and 11 the last 2 games, I think that you got to consider, between Cat and Rudy and probably Nas, I bet a combined out of those, 2-game stretch of 24 turnovers, I'm willing to bet that 6 of those were offensive fouls on screens or charges, offensive foul turnovers. And so those are not live ball turnovers. Obviously, you don't want any turnovers when you can help it, but there's a big difference between a live ball turnover and a dead ball turnover. And when the Wolves are only committed, when the Wolves are in the 13, 14 turnover range, but 4 of those are dead ball turnovers. So really the live ball turnovers is in the 7, 8, 9 range. That's, dare I say, acceptable, And so if you got 13 turnovers in a game, but out of those 13 turnovers, 4 of them are offensive fouls, either on screens or charges between Cat and Rudy and Nas. So if you committed 9 live ball turnovers, you can manage that. You can win that way. Especially, and the Timberwolves don't create a heck of a lot of turnovers, but they do block some shots, which are also fast break starters. They all cause, I think Rudy's causing the lowest shooting percentage at the rim out of any player in the league. And as you very well know, missed layups and missed shots at the rim are also fast break starters. And so even though they're not turning teams over at a really high rate, they are doing things with their defense that start fast breaks and that start transition game. You know, had 8 block shots against Memphis. Those start fast breaks. You know, and I'm looking up the Spurs number real quick. They had I feel like they had a number of blocks against the Spurs. They had 10 block shots against the Spurs. So, you know, 2 games, 18 block shots. Even though they only caused 11 turnovers against the Spurs and against the Grizzlies, they caused
18 blocks in
9
total.
turnovers. But those block shots are fast break starters just as much as anything else.
Right. Okay, so those are my 3 concerning trends. Do you recall yours?
Yes, mine were the turnovers as well. And we already talked about that. Mike Conley's minutes, and I kind of put an asterisk around that. And I'm still a little worried about that. He actually left the game and went back to the locker room against Memphis before coming back and having a finish to that game. And the other one was, the fouling. And they've kind of gotten that back under control. Now, granted, they played 2 bad teams, but they were fouling a little bit too much. And they got that back under control against those bad teams in terms of the free throws that they were giving up. They shot 26 free throws against Memphis to Memphis's 19. And then against the Spurs, they shot 21 free throws to the Spurs 15. So that's an acceptable number. And they kind of got, and those are the reasons they beat those bad teams. They cleaned up those things, because if you don't clean up those things, that's how bad teams sneak up and get a W against you. But being professional, by being disciplined, by not doing the things that beat yourself, they're able to go ahead and win 2 games against subpar teams and avoid the upset bug. So big ups to them for handling the concerning trends aspect of it.
Okay, so now the hope it never ends. I talked about the record. I think when I originally said that, we were at 75%. The Wolves right now are at...
I think they're on pace to win like 67, 68 games right now. So, you know, their win percentage, I mean, they're 17-4. So,
right.
So they are winning, you know.
They are at 77%.
Yeah. So
it's continuing, and I can't be mad at it. So I'm just going to say that for the rest of the year. And for all the superstitious people out there, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to say 75% every single time we do this until we fall below.
Yeah, I think one of your hope it never ends was Cat in the way that he was playing.
Yeah.
And so big ups to Cat for kind of, you know, continuing to do what he's doing. And I don't remember what your third one was, man. I don't remember. I remember mine. I don't remember what yours was.
You don't need to. Give me yours.
Well, one of mine was definitely the vibes. Mine was also the record, the winning percentage. The vibe around Target Center was definitely one of my hope it never ends. I believe, now I'm trying to remember what my other one was, because I was agreeing with you on the winning, the vibes around Target Center. And also, and that was a 3A, because 3B was also the Coach and the Culture podcast being correct with our predictions coming into the season about Wolves, you know, really being one of the upper teams in the West because of the continuity factor and because of the familiarity factor. And I don't remember what my third one was, to be honest with you, without going back and listening to the podcast, but whatever it was, I hope it never ends.
Yeah. All right. Real quick, I just actually did the math on that winning percentage. It's actually 80%.
Yeah.
The Wolves are winning at an 80% clip. So,
yeah, it's not sustainable, but it is lovely to see right now, 2021.
Right.
And, you know, we are literally 1/4 of the way through the NBA regular season. And we are hoping that the Wolves are at the top of the NBA rankings when we get to 2/4. That is 1/2 of the way through the regular season. And it'll be curious to see once the All-Star break, or the trade deadline starts to come around. It'll be really interesting to see come, January, what happens in terms of what they feel like they need to do or don't need to do to tweak their roster.
I'm calling it right now. The Wolves aren't doing anything.
We'll see. We'll see.
How can you?
I think a lot of that depends on Shake Milton, to be honest with you. And I mean, right now, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's handling the backup point guard duties admirably. Shake Milton's got to get it rolling, and we talked about that. We both think that he's gonna kind of, start to take off a little bit here. But
J-Mac's coming back.
The second point guard.
J-Mac's coming back.
He is back. But do you really want him to be your second point guard going into the playoffs?
I would say that if you're going into the playoffs, you're not going to be playing a whole lot of second point guard. You're going to be doing a little bit of what they're doing now. And I personally, I'm calling it the Wolves aren't making any trades that affect their core 8-9 players. Now, if they send someone that's not, go ahead.
Would you do Kyle Anderson and maybe a Josh Minot for Tyus Jones?
Yes.
Okay, so as I was saying, it'll be curious to see what they do on the trade tonight.
Yeah, it's just I like Kyle Anderson, and I think that honestly, I think he's a safety blanket for them. And so, much as what?
How many did Tyus give y'all?
Not enough.
No. How many did he give y'all when you?
Yeah, like 30, 31, and 15. It was nothing crazy.
30 and 15, nothing crazy.
No. But no, we will see. But yeah, that's what we've got. We made it through our list of talking points tonight. Had some good conversation. Hopefully gave some more insight and some more coaching perspective, as well as me chiming in and giving you some players' advice. And we'll be next week on Sunday after these 3 games, we'll be able to recap and see how the Wolves managed.
Next week, we will be on video. I'm going to get my hair done, get my beard trimmed up, and throw on my Sunday best clothes.
I'm still going to look better than you.
Yeah, well, you should. You're a lot younger than me. I'm a tablespoon, you're the teaspoon.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Coach and the Culture podcast. For Lance Gardner and the super producer, Lloyd Leon Coop. And a big shout out to Markella over at the Dream Shop, where we record live video every other Sunday, 3701 Fremont. She's been sponsoring us with a place to do our video every other Sunday. And so if you have not done so yet, please go to YouTube, punch in the Coach and the Culture in your search, and check out our video from last week, and you can decide for yourself who the better looking one is, the father or the son. And we're gonna be keeping a watchful eye on how the Timberwolves handle this week and be ready to talk about it next Sunday. So tune in, check us out, the Coach and the Culture podcast. Thank y'all. Peace.
Peace.